So the idea, sir, is that we just want to have a sort of a freewheeling conversation with you about the business and how well Uniwealth Health is doing. So we'll just quickly start with a quick introduction of yours, and then after the video is done, I'll edit it and I'll send it to you for your approval, and
Sure.
only then we'll sort of give it out.
Will do.
Sure, sir. So hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today, we are speaking with someone who's built one of the most interesting healthcare platforms operating across India and Africa. Unihealth Limited is a company that started with medical value travel in 2010 and over the years has evolved into a multi-country hospital and healthcare services network. From running high efficiency hospitals in Uganda and Tanzania to now expanding aggressively in India, UniHealth represents a different kind of healthcare story. And the person behind this journey is with us today, Dr. Akshay Parmar, Managing Director of UniHealth Hospitals and one of the promoters. Today, we're not going to just discuss numbers, but the thinking, systems, and strategic choices that have shaped UniHealth to what it is today. Dr. Akshay, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here.
It's a pleasure.
So we just want to sort of kickstart with understanding is that why what was your early journey like? I think after graduating, what led you to co-found a medical tourism company? I think UniHealth started off as that initially, and then sort of metamorphosed into something else. So if you could just tell us something about your early years. So.
Sure. So this takes us back to somewhere around 2008, 2009, when Dr. Anurag and myself, the two promoters who co-founded Unihealth, were still studying for our MBBS. And that's when an idea struck us. That was also a period when Apollo Hospitals, Fortis were all actively pursuing medical tourism. And it was all over in the news at that point of time how medical value travel or medical tourism, as it's commonly called, is going to be the next big service industry when it comes to healthcare. How it's going to lead to a multi-billion-dollar inflow for India as a destination. And that is what caught our imagination. And somewhere down the line, we thought that it is a good idea to experiment with. So, though we were pursuing MBBS, we did not want to, leave that idea aside. We thought, let us give ourselves 1 year. That is the year when we would be interning, see how it shapes up, and then take a call at the end of that particular year. So that is how UniHealth informally took shape in 2009. Between 2009 and 2010, we experimented, we understood the industry, we understood what requirements it would have, and we, in an informal way, started working towards this particular idea. 2010 February, we formally incorporated the company. Back then, it was called UniHealth Consultancy Private Limited, and we started this journey in medical value travel. Very early in our days, we realized that though the initial euphoria was towards the white patients, that things are very expensive in the US and in the, European countries, and there's a long waiting line, and that is why patients would come here. It was actually not true. The maximum patient base that was coming in into India for treatments was from the African continent, were from the Middle Eastern countries, were from countries where there was lack of healthcare. So basically, these were patients who had the resources but did not have the right facility to go to within their own country, and the only choice left for them was to travel overseas. And that is where India was becoming a favored destination for a variety of factors. Quality of healthcare in 2010 had improved a lot compared to what it was in late 90s and early 2000s. India culturally also was well integrated with the African continent, since there's a big Indian diaspora in Africa, in Middle East, and that is what led to this inflow of patients, and that is what led us to Africa. So between 2010 and 2015, medical tourism or medical value travel was the mainstay for UniHealth, and it was this particular vertical which actually took us into Africa, which allowed us to travel to multiple countries in Africa, understand the on-ground realities, requirements, and when in 2015 at a conference in UK in London, the two of us were there, and we thought, what next? I mean, what would be the vision for the next 5 years, 10 years, and beyond for the company, and maybe personally for ourselves? We realized that though medical tourism is a fantastic business, it was reaping benefits for the company at that point of time. It was not something that would allow us to create a long lasting legacy. So medical tourism was doing well. Patients from Africa were coming to India. But eventually, somewhere down in the future, facilities will develop in Africa. Maybe if not in all the countries, at least in some select countries, and those countries will start becoming the regional hubs. For example, in the 1970s and 80s, patients from India were traveling to UK or to US for advanced treatment, and now we are seeing the reverse happening. So the same was likely to be true for Africa as well. We said we have a good understanding of Africa. We had cultivated certain relationships out there. So why not take the first step and put up the first physical center out there, maybe in the form of a polyclinic and a diagnostic center. That is how we sounded out our team on ground in Africa. The first opportunity came to us in a city called Mwanza in Tanzania. There was a medical center which was up for sale. We ended up acquiring that. And on 1st of Jan 2016, the first Unihealth Medical Center was commissioned. UMC, the short form, became a well established logo in that geography. So when we went on to the next step, that is putting up the first hospital, we wanted to stick around with the brand which had created its own presence and niche in that geography. And that is how the name UMC Hospitals came up. Between 2016 and 2018, we expanded from Tanzania into Uganda and Nigeria and expanded the footprint to establish tertiary care hospitals as well.
Right. Right.
So that in brief, was the journey of how,
Right.
being medical professionals, we steered away from clinical practice, moved into this business as an experiment, and then moved in from medical tourism into physical infrastructure or
Right.
hospitals and medical centers.
Right. And so I think life comes a full circle because now with our Indian hospital up, you'll again be facilitating medical tourism right from Africa to India.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
yeah. So I just wanted to understand what is the kind of scale that we saw in our early days in the medical tourism, the consulting business that we had at that time,
Right.
and what is the kind of capital investment that it took to take all the African centers up and running, and what if you could give us a sense of the geography of Africa, because while healthcare is similar across the globe, I'm sure that there are different nuances when it comes to Indian and African healthcare.
Right. So, in terms of the initial investment or in terms of how we scaled up. So, just to give a perspective, we were with one of the first, or we were the first company in the country with which a big tertiary care hospital collaborated to actually outsource the entire international business. So, in 2011, we collaborated with Aditya Birla Memorial Hospital, which is part of the Aditya Birla Group. Albeit it's not a business center for them, it's more of a foundation run facility, but it's a quaternary care private facility, and we joined hands with them. We collaborated with them in a manner where the entire international business of that hospital was outsourced to Unihealth. So effectively, outside India, we were the ones who were representing them. We were the ones who were marketing them. We were the ones on ground out here who were taking care of all
Yeah.
the international patients coming into that hospital. And that was one of its kind of a collaboration, which allowed us, despite being a facilitator or a company which was facilitating, international patients, to actually represent itself as a hospital in Africa. Because we were exclusively representing Aditya Birla Memorial Hospital, it allowed us to negotiate or to represent us accordingly out there. That led to a very interesting collaboration that we had in 2013. So, for a 3-year period, we collaborated with Ethiopian Air, which is the largest African airline. And that we launched something that we called Unihealth Ethiopian Air Medical Travel Program. Now, under that program, on the face of it, Ethiopian Air was extending a wide array of benefits to the patients who wanted to travel from the African continent via Ethiopian Air for treatment under the program. So the patient and one relative would get 25% discount. They would get free date changes, extra baggage. They had the liberty of depositing payments locally at the Ethiopian Air offices. So that gave a lot of advantage when it came to the patient. That gave us a lot of visibility when it came to UniHealth. Because effectively in Africa at that point of time, still tickets were booked physically at the airline offices or at the agents. They were not, the online media was not as trusted as a modality to book airline tickets. And that allowed us to expand into almost 40 plus countries. Each country where Ethiopian Air had a physical office, that office became a representative office for the UniHealth Ethiopian Air Medical Travel Program. So that scale and visibility that UniHealth got between 2013 and 2016 because of that collaboration was unique in its own self. Post that, when we started with our own medical centers, we decided to take a step back when it came to medical travel. Again, this was because of a perceived impact. In the early 2000s, There were a few Indian hospital groups which were keen to establish themselves in Africa. They partnered with the governments out there, but the projects never took shape. And that is where, at the government level, by 2015, a mindset had developed that Indian hospitals want to come in only to attract patients and take them back to India. They
Right.
don't really want to develop healthcare on ground, and that was becoming a bottleneck for us as a brand, as Unihealth as a brand. When we were going to these government departments to request for certain tax benefits, incentives, because the thought process was very simple from their end that you will take these incentives, you will market yourself, you will maybe just do a small center out there, but effectively you will not develop anything. You will want to take the patients back home.
Right.
And that is when we realized that it is best that we take a step back when it came to medical tourism and represent ourselves as a full-fledged hospital group only, which has its primary focus in Africa. So that is how in 2016, when this particular collaboration was nearing its end, we did not go forward to renew it. We handed it over to Ethiopian Air. We created a blueprint, and then Ethiopian Air took it forward by collaborating directly with a large number of hospitals in India.
Right.
But that allowed us to scale up massively. When it came to the first center that we had, the initial acquisition cost was less than $100,000. So it was a risk that we thought as a privately held company was worth taking. Definitely, then a lot of investments were made to upgrade the facility, to add on specialties. But with that, it also gave us an understanding, via that acquisition of the ground realities of the way the licensing in these countries work, the way the manpower, the labor requirements, the labor laws are. So that allowed us a very good understanding at a small price point to create the bench strength to take and expand forward.
So
And
this
that
was
is when the
Tanzania, right?
opportunity came up in Uganda, we were able to take it conclusively.
So the first investment was in Tanzania, right?
First investment was in
This was
Tanzania. It was an
Tanzania.
acquisition. It was
It
actually
was an
started, that
acquisition.
center was started by a local doctor out there who
Right.
was relocating to UK for further studies with his entire family. So he was
Right.
keen to sell it off. And we
Right.
were looking for the right opportunity where we were able to acquire something which was functioning. So it gave us
Right.
the licenses on day one. It gave us an operating business on day one. And it allowed us access to some established manpower in terms of,
Right.
the doctors, the nurses,
Right.
so that we do not have to have a long lean period where we were
Sure.
investing but not generating any revenues.
Sure. Sure. And I think after this, the pivotal moment for the company was obviously our establishment in Uganda, which is right now our biggest cash cow per se. So how did that happen? I think we that was a JV with
That was a
yeah.
JV. So what happened was a very interesting story. It was a chance meeting when we invested in Tanzania. Obviously, we needed to upgrade that facility for which we needed to buy a lot of equipment. And every year in Dubai, there is a big, what do you call it, fair, equipment fair or healthcare exhibition that happens by the name Arab Health. So Dr. Anurag was at Arab Health and he had a chance meeting with our partner today and a very close friend, Dr. Chirag, who was based out of Uganda. He was a practicing doctor in Uganda, and he and his family were venturing out and setting up a hospital. So they had a chance meeting that led to multiple discussions, that led to the understanding that we were the right partners for them to actually execute that project and maybe take over the operational management, whereas he can focus on the clinical aspect of his faculty. So
Right.
that is how one thing led to another. From February 2016, when that first meeting happened, to October 2016, there was a time when we actually ended up becoming equity partners in that project. Multiple meetings happened and a lot of exchange happened, but the comfort developed such that instead of being operating partners for them, we ended up investing equally with them to
Right.
expand the footprint in Africa. And
Right.
that was a pivotal moment for UniHealth because that led to the first tertiary care hospital under the group.
Right. Right. And so after that, I mean, could you give us a sense of the healthcare environment in Uganda and Kampala?
Right.
So how are we placed there? Are we one of the marquee brands there? Are there multiple players in the geography? Because I think people in India, especially even us, we wouldn't have a sense of how healthcare operates out there.
Right. So healthcare in Africa again has a very interesting aspect to it. Each country behaves very differently. When we speak about Uganda, the market, as a country, they do not have national health insurance, which is very widely present today in Kenya and Tanzania. So each geography has its own challenges, limitations, and opportunities. But when it comes to overall as a continent today, Africa has a severe requirement or a big requirement and need for specialized and super specialized services. So that is where the focus for us from day one was. It was not to have a normal regular hospital. It was to have something which was akin to an Apollo or a HN Reliance or a Breach Candy, which was equipped in a state of the art manner, which had protocols which were benchmarked to international standards, and which had all the equipment that could allow us to cater to the specialty and super specialty requirements. So
Right.
that is how we made the first move. As we speak today, we are one of the finest, premiermost institute in the country out there in terms of private sector. We are amongst the largest ones. We are one of the only ones who are approved and accredited by the United Nations. So we receive patients from not only within Uganda, but almost 7 to 8 neighboring countries where UN and the UN agencies have a big presence. We are also the preferred hospital of choice for the Ugandan military. So that says it all and sums it up, where we can comfortably say that a large number of HNIs in that country, a large number of corporate houses in that country, a large number of bureaucrats, embassy personnels, ministers, they prefer UMC hospital as the hospital of choice.
Right.
So over these years, I mean, between 2016, 2017, when we first established ourselves, and 2025, these 9 years, not only establishing the basic services, but investing into and developing specialties and super specialties has been the key focus. So as we speak, over the last 2 years, we've upgraded the orthopedic and spine to an extent where today we are able to do advanced spine procedures, arthroscopic surgeries, joint replacement surgeries. We've invested to set up IVF, which is infertility treatment. So again, that is a super specialty that we've done. We are very close to investing into and setting up and commissioning our ophthalmology services. The next on the list would be cardiology and cardiothoracic surgery, again, which is a big gap in that country today. So we are focusing on super specialties, which allows that country to actually develop the healthcare infrastructure. And in recognition of that, Unihealth, I mean, the unit out there, the company out there, has been extended income tax holiday as well for a period of 10 years, so that we are able to save on the cash flow. And instead of making payments towards taxation, we are intending to reinvest that to upgrade the infrastructure, bring in newer specialties, bring in more doctors, and overall, develop the healthcare infrastructure of the country as a
Right.
whole. So, and this is the scenario nearly across Africa. So, whether a country has national health or no, that is a different aspect that comes to your payer mix. But when it comes
Yeah.
to the need, the requirement for specialized, super specialized quality care across major countries in Africa is the need of the hour.
Right. Right. And so I just wanted to ask, I think when we have a look at the business from a top-down perspective, uh, the only risk that comes to mind is that Africa is some sort of or a slightly alien kind of country, especially for from an Indian healthcare perspective, whether we call it a business perspective or valuation perspective. The perceived risk of not receiving payments that people have, and I mean, in India also, I think working capital days are stretched for businesses that have a B2G kind of there, kind of setup. But what would you say when you have a B2G kind of setup in Africa? What is the perceived risk, and how are we able to collectively, manage our receivables over the years, and how have we done that?
Right. So, in my opinion, the perceived risks are twofold. One definitely relates to the risk of bad debts or payments not coming in, and second relates to the currency depreciation. So, when it comes to the first one, it is genuinely just a perceived risk. It does not have any credence because, again, out here you're dealing with the government, you're dealing with a sovereign body. Historically, over the last 30, 35 plus years, that we had discussions with bankers, with other people who've been in the industry doing B2G businesses in different segments and sectors. There has never been a default. Again, healthcare out there today is something very similar and akin to a roti kapda makan. So it is a basic necessity. So even if the government has to defer or maybe delay payments beyond a reasonable timeline, as per the local standards, I wouldn't say that 9 to 12 months is a reasonable timeline from an Indian perspective. But yes, in Uganda or in some of these countries where you're dealing with the government, that is the standard timeline. So if they were to delay or defer payments beyond that, healthcare wouldn't be the sector that they would want to experiment with such delays, because again they are also dependent. Their bureaucrats, their army personnel, their police forces, everyone comes to us or the healthcare industry, in totality. So healthcare industry per se is safeguarded from that perspective. Currency depreciation risk, definitely that is a genuine risk factor that is there. Now, how does it play out? East Africa is relatively stable. So if we again go historically back into almost 2+ decades, the currency depreciation has not been significant or at a rate which can lead to significant losses. We entered when the Ugandan shilling was about 3,300 to a dollar. Today, this was in 2016. Today, in 2025, we are talking about it at 3,600, 3,650 to a dollar, which is about 300 shillings, which is barely 10%. In comparison, if I look at the INR, the depreciation has been nearly 50%.
Right.
So that risk, though, is a genuine risk. East Africa is relatively better off in terms of geopolitical scenarios, in terms of their relationship with global, majors like the US or European Union, in terms of their relationship with the Indian government as well. The strategic investment required from the Indian side into these countries is huge. So there's a lot of investment that India is also making out there. There is a significantly huge Indian diaspora. Again, if you look at the Indian origin East Africans, they control more than 50 to 60% of the GDP of these countries. They are not control, they contribute to more than 50 to 60%. So you've got a lot of Gujarati families which are now third and fourth and fifth generation out there, and which are big names and big business houses today out there. So from that perspective, though it being a genuine risk, it does not have a big long-term negative impact when it comes to healthcare sector. Again, to mitigate that on the upfront basis, what happens is one, to mitigate the payment cycle from the government side. It is an understood fact that we are able to factor in the cost of finance or cost of funding for about 12 months and bill them accordingly. So if someone is getting billed, say, 100 rupee for a particular service, and the local cost of funding for a year is 21, 22%, you are able to charge 125 rupees to a B2G sort of a client. So out there, your cost of funding is taken care of. So that is one mitigating factor. We add on another 5 rupees out there to reduce the risk of currency depreciation. So
Right.
from that perspective, the necessary steps have been taken care of and are in place when it comes to Unihealth and UMC hospitals. Further, now we have got certain clients like the United Nations where the billing and the payment is in US dollar. So again, that also allows us that whatever dependency as a company locally in Uganda we have on importation of medicines, of consumables, or of equipment, that dollar outflow is
Limited. Right.
comfortably catered to by the dollar inflow from clients like United Nations or certain global insurance companies.
And so
So
what
over a
percentage
period of time,
of our
that is
total,
mitigated to a large
right,
extent.
right. So what percentage of our total billing would be so in dollars, and what percentage
Not
would be in US?
significant, but I
Not
would
significant.
say that about 8 to 10% would be in US
Be in
dollar
dollars.
terms.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And that is good enough for the import bill that we have.
Right. Right.
So, hi sir, my most of questions are number specific. So, I just wanted to know like are most of revenue is coming from Uganda right now? And
Right.
if I see the receivable days, so that's also very high for Uganda. So, could you please give me the breakup of like how much revenue is coming from government for Uganda so that we can have the clarity on the receivable side? Like if
Right.
the most of revenue is coming from government, that's why the receivables are high.
So I'll tell you the payer mix. Now in Uganda, the over these years, the payer mix has been such that whatever the revenue portion is, between 20 and 25% is cash paying patients who would actually pay upfront cash. The next about say 15 to 20% patient base is from insurance companies, corporate clients who enjoy a credit anywhere ranging from 45 days to say about 100, days. So that is the typical cycle for the regional insurance companies. There's nothing like local insurance. So any company in terms of insurance sector which is present in Uganda would have a presence in Kenya, Tanzania, maybe Rwanda, Burundi. So these regional insurance companies, the payment cycle is around 100 plus minus 10 days, and corporate clients usually pay in about 45 to 60 days. So another 15 odd percent would come to this. So this would total around about 40% of the total revenue. Then 60% of the revenue would come from government or government subsidiaries or different departments. So it's not only the Ugandan military, it is different departments under the government. Now also when we talk about Ugandan military, in effect, if I'm looking at the patient base that they have, that itself is larger than the private insured patients in the country. So privately insured patients in Uganda today would be nearly say about half a million. UPDF, Ugandan military itself has a base which is larger than this. So you have to take that into consideration also as a big, big client, which without which practically it is not worthwhile doing business because you will not be able to develop and get the scale. Now, as we are moving forward, as we are adding on super specialties, some of these super specialties generate cash. You don't do this on credit, whether it's the government department or whether it's the private paying patient or the insurance sector. If I'm doing something like IVF or infertility treatment, it is technically typically not covered under these credit payments, and that payment is coming upfront. So there are a lot of specialized treatments which is being done upfront that will start adding on to the cash revenue that the company is generating. So maybe going forward, that 20 to 23% of cash patient would go to say 27, 28%. As we also move into the coming financial year, there will be significant contribution coming in from our operations in India and the operations that we're likely to commence in Tanzania next year. So from that perspective, in line with the thought process that the management had in 2023, that over a period of 3 to 3.5 years, we would want to reduce our dependency in terms of top line from any one geography in Africa to less than one third. So this will start coming into action and effect. So as we move into the next year, maybe the contribution from the top line from Uganda would come down from the existing 85 odd percent to somewhere around 50 odd percent. And then it will start going down to below 40% and it will be in a comfortable zone. When that happens, automatically the consolidated receivable days will also start coming down. Because in India, you're not going to have receivable days in going into 180 days and beyond. Even if we were going to go and cater to certain credit patients or certain government schemes, we do anticipate payments to come within that particular time period. When I'm talking about Tanzania, 85% of the beneficiary or the patients in Tanzania come from national health insurance. And over the years, their payment cycle has been 90 to 100 days. So again, out there on the higher side, 120 days, 4 months would be the typical cycle within which definitely the payments come in because that has historically been happening. So as we move forward into the next couple of financial years, the entire dynamic with respect to trade receivables, with respect to the contribution from Uganda, will start shifting to a zone where the comfort factor is significantly higher.
Right. So I think so. To sum it up, what we understood is that while B2G business is a complex one, a complex relationship to handle, but in the last 5 to 10 years, we've never had any collections, any issues when it comes to receivables. I think we did have a few receivables that were more than 2 years or 3 years. I think in the DRHP it was mentioned, but I think that was just a one-off case, or was it
No, that's just a one-off case. What
right?
sometimes happens is your submission of bills, their understanding, their clearance. So sometimes there is a mismatch which is kept aside, and the
Right.
focus is always on getting payments. So
Mhm.
sometimes some of the bills which were kept aside a couple of years back are still in the process, and eventually they come in. So we
Right.
have started receiving some of those older payments. We are anticipating some more payments in the coming 3 to 4 months.
Right.
But that is the reason. It's mainly one off. Again, one important factor out here is that with respect to the government business, uh, bad debts is one aspect. There is not even a rejection. So there is no rejection of say 1% or 2% or downsizing of your bill, which is a standard process when it comes to insurance companies, whether it's in India or overseas. So
Right.
that is also a secure business in terms of the
Right.
government business, where if you're billing say 100 rupees, you will get the entire 100 rupees.
Right.
Unlike insurance company where the intent would be to pay 98 or 97 and refuse or reject some part of that bill based on some reason or the other.
Right. Right. So I think before we dive deeper into the African Indian business, for our viewers, could you just give a breakup of the entire corporate structure and how is it
Sure.
in Africa and how is it in India? And I think we have a holding company for Africa as well, right?
Right. So basically, Unihealth Hospitals Limited, the first company that was incorporated in 2010, when we started making or setting up hospitals in Africa, obviously we needed a local entity. So there were three basic principles that with which we entered into Africa. One, we will not go with less than 50%. So it was 50% or more in any investment that we were going to be making. We will always have a local partner who is strong, who is from a non-healthcare background in terms of the operations and who will invest equally. So it was never going to be a sweat equity for the local partner. It was going to be that the administrative bureaucratic challenges will be navigated by him. He will bring on table his expertise of understanding the geography, he will bring on table the investment equivalent to the stake that he's getting. So these were critical pillars for our investment. And the last one was that the facilities would be under the operational management of Unihealth. So irrespective of whether we own 50% or we own 80%, the operational day-to-day management will reside with Unihealth. It will be under the UMC brand, whose ownership effectively is with Unihealth. So these were the basic structures with which we moved ahead. So each country that we ventured into, obviously there was a company locally registered, which was either a subsidiary or a joint venture. So when it comes to Uganda, it was a joint venture. In terms of accounting aspect, it is a wholly owned, it is a subsidiary under Indian accounting standard. The equity holding for us is 50%, and our local partners own 50%. In Uganda, in Tanzania, the structure was slightly different, where we own 99% of one of the companies, we own 80% of the other. In Nigeria, it was again a 50-50 joint venture at that point of time. Now, post our listing, what we have done is we've created a wholly owned subsidiary in Mauritius, which in turn will invest and take up stakes in any new businesses that we have in Africa. The idea was very simple, that we house everything for that continent under a vehicle in Mauritius, which allows us later in date to unlock value at that level, to raise capital in terms of debt or structured debt if required for expansion at the Mauritian level itself. So without diluting or without pressurizing the Indian books, we are able to cater to the requirements for the expansion in Africa for the African business, using the benefits of Africa itself. And when it came to India, for the hospitals that we had to set it up out here, we created UMC Hospitals Private Limited, which is again a subsidiary of the listed entity, under which the present Navi Mumbai facility has been commissioned. The Nashik facility, which is upcoming, is housed, and all the expansion will happen in that. So this is how the overall corporate structure is placed right now, where under Unihealth, we've got 100% subsidiary in Mauritius, which will further, make investments in different African countries as we go forward. And we have a subsidiary in India, which is setting up hospitals across. The existing hospital facility in Uganda stays the way it is. That is, it's a 50% equity ownership of the listed entity itself.
Right, right. And I think in our standalone business in India, that's just a consulting business, right?
That's more so just a consultancy business.
Right,
And as we are moving forward, we do intend to grow that. That is also the business which owns, that is also the company that owns the UMC brand and expertise quality, against which there is a small percentage of the revenue ranging from 1.5 to 2% that it charges as a management fee come royalty. So that main one component was back standalone basis Unihealth.
Right. So I just wanted to ask that we have one hospital in Africa, in Nigeria. So what's the reason behind the exit of that hospital after April 2025?
Right. So we had a hospital in a city called Kano in northern Nigeria. It was a 80-bed facility. Now, over the last 2 years, that is from 2022-23 onwards, unfortunately, Nigerian currency witnessed a significant depreciation. So going down from about 365 naira to nearly 1700 naira in a span of less than 12 months. So one impact, that though on ground locally our business was increasing and improvising, we were generating profits, we were generating incremental revenue. In terms of an INR basis, it was not really translating into a growth. It was a negative growth because the currency depreciation was significantly huge, where the government itself decided to devalue its currency to about 1100 naira, within a day. So it went down from about 400, 500 naira to 1100 naira in a day. That was the official devaluation. And from there, then it further slid down to nearly 1700 naira. For us, that was one factor of exiting, not that it was resulting in losses locally or even at the INR level, we were in the negative, but that limited our ability and capacity to invest further in that country. So there was no point of staying stagnant in a country with one facility. The idea was always that we would invest more, we would set up facilities in other cities in that country like Lagos or Abuja, and expand the presence because it's a big country. Nigeria is the largest population when it comes to a single country in Africa. So the potential was there, but because of this significant depreciation in the local naira, it limited our ability. We were not keen to make further investments on an immediate basis. Second was a more moral issue for us. So up north in Kano, we have been used to working with electricity fluctuations, working on the dependency of diesel generators for 8 to 9 hours on a daily basis round the year. On a bad day, it would go to about 12, 13 hours. On a good day, it would be 6 hours. But again, coinciding with this depreciation of the currency, the electricity situation worsened. So we started becoming dependent on the diesel generator for nearly 20, 21 hours every single day. So effectively to run critical services, it became extremely expensive because you could not shut down your diesel generator when you got a patient in the ICU. Contrary to our thought process, a lot of government hospitals and a lot of other private hospitals, okay, private hospitals did not really have intensive care out there, but the critical care units in the government hospitals were also shut down because they also were unable to run on the requirement of diesel generators throughout the day. So they started shutting down the generators. They stopped taking in patients for critical care. Now that became a moral issue for us because knowing that we have got the infrastructure, we have got the doctors, and the patient's life can be saved if he goes on a ventilator. Just to save some funds or some money and generate profits, if I were to shut down my ICU, it could lead to the unfortunate loss of life of a patient. That was a decision that, as management, we were not ready to take, and we ran the critical care unit. We, ran the diesel generators 20, 22 hours a day till 31st of March, which is when we made that exit on 1st of April. Luckily for us, compared to Uganda, where we also own the real estate, in Nigeria, the real estate was not owned by us. It was more of a rental premises. And the person who owns that real estate came forward. He was a public servant who had retired just about a couple of months back. And he was keen that he relocate back to Kano. And he came forward to take up the operations and management of the hospital if we were to exit. So we thought that it was the right time for us to properly hand over the facility without disrupting the services and hand it over to the property owner himself, and that he will be at liberty then to decide, how to run the facility. So from a moral perspective, it was more pertinent for us to take a step back and reassess and reevaluate our business strategy in Nigeria. So as we stand today, our company still runs in Nigeria. The focus has shifted from actually running that hospital to now sending in teams of doctors at partner hospitals to conduct OPDs and conduct surgical camps, which we were doing earlier at the UMC facility. So instead of my doctors now going and operating at a UMC facility in Kano, they will go to multiple different facilities in Lagos or Abuja that we are partnering with, and conduct the spine surgeries or the joint
Right.
surgeries or any other laparoscopic procedure that we plan to do. And second aspect would be to then again get patients who are intending to travel from Nigeria to India, to get them and get them operated at UMC hospitals that are being set up in India, whether it's in Navi Mumbai, Nasik, or at a later stage maybe in Pune. So the medical tourism part of it, because Nigeria again is one of the biggest countries contributing to the medical tourism industry in India. So the focus for the company would be to one, get patients from there to UMC hospitals in India. Second, send our teams of doctors on a regular interval to do OPD camps and to do surgical camps out there. So we will have a smaller top line, but with a fixed bottom line compared to a larger top line and the risk of going negative,
Right.
when we were running the hospital and we had the challenges of both the currency depreciation and the electricity situation.
Right. So I think so.
Okay.
If we were to look at
So
the African
right
business,
now, if I see the
yeah, yeah, go on, please. Please.
yeah, so right now if I see the filing, so right now we have two hospitals operational, right? The one is in Uganda and one is in Navi Mumbai.
Right. So
So
now we've got 120 beds in Uganda. We've got
yeah,
50 beds in Navi Mumbai that has been commissioned. We are expanding our presence in Uganda. We are adding on certain clinics, and we are also adding on a couple of secondary care hospitals in the coming few months. So we will start one at a time. So that bed capacity in Uganda is likely to go up from 120 to say 150 and beyond in the coming 12 months. Simultaneously, in Nasik, we are adding 200 beds. So 50 in Navi Mumbai, 200 in Nasik would make 250 beds, about 150 beds in Uganda, which will take it to 400 beds. We are adding a secondary care hospital in Mwanza, where we initially had a medical center. So that's a 20-bed facility. So it'll take us to 420 beds. And we are in last stages of discussions to take over about 100 beds at tertiary care hospital in Dar es Salaam. So if that happens, that will allow us to cross to beyond 500 beds in the coming financial year itself. And post that, then we will be looking at expansion in different geographies or different suburbs of Mumbai and in Pune, which is next on our radar in terms of the expansion.
Right, right. So I think before we deep dive into the Indian business, just wanted to understand for Uganda right now, which is 75 or 80% of our business. Uganda essentially looks like the hospital in Kampala essentially looks like it's sort of become a free cash flow engine. I mean, if you look at the numbers this year, 15 crore PAT that is attributable to us roughly. So if that can generate 25 to 30 crores of PAT every year, essentially that itself can be invested not only in Africa, that money, but also at some point that money come back to India as well?
Yes. So Uganda, like you mentioned, is now become a mature business. So it has become debt free as well as of 30th of September 2025, when all the repayments in terms of the bank obligations that the company had, which we had taken to initially acquire the asset, the land, building, and the equipment, all of that has been repaid. So there is zero repayment to be made to the bankers today. Going forward, definitely whatever profitability that the company is generating will be used in a threefold manner. One part of it would go into expanding the infrastructure, adding on more clinics, maybe adding on new super specialties. A small part of that expansion would also entail adding on a secondary care facility. A small portion would be a portion to working capital, which will allow us the liberty to bring down our cost of inventory further down from what it is right now. So it will allow us to make incremental imports directly from India. Then a portion of this, cash that will be there with the company will be used to start repaying the shareholder debt. So as Unihealth Hospitals right now, we have an exposure or an investment to that company in the form of equity and in the form of debt. So that debt will start coming back to Unihealth Hospitals Limited. So that will be the first level at which the profitability of the Ugandan unit will start getting used for repayment, and that cash flow will start coming back to India. And then last stage would be actually declaring dividends. So this is
Right,
how over the coming few years, whatever profitability that the Uganda unit has, whether it's 20 crores, 25 crores, 30 crores or beyond annually, will start getting utilized for definitely that fund which comes back to India, whether it is via repayment of the debt that we have extended to the Ugandan unit or in the form of dividend, that will start getting reinvested for expansion either into Africa or into the Indian facilities. So that will also help us to ensure that on a consolidated basis, as we rapidly expand, when the newer facilities are witnessing some pressure on the EBITDA margins and maybe making certain operational losses in the first couple of quarters, the incremental profitability that will come into the company from the Ugandan unit will help ensure that the EBITDA levels are maintained at 30% and above and don't go below that on a consolidated basis.
right. So what is the ARPOB for the African unit right now, the Uganda?
So for the African unit now, which mainly comprises of Uganda, I think the average revenue for the last period, 6 month period or half yearly, was upwards of 40,000 rupees per bed per day.
Which is high for Africa, or is it stable, or is
Which
it
is very good when it comes to the big names in India, which is definitely high for Africa. So even
right?
if I'm doing so, I'm not doing a peer-to-peer comparison where I can compare a 120 bed with a 120 bed in India. But if
Right.
you look at the bigger players out here, their average revenue ranges from 40,000 to 65,000. Now, where it ranges between 50 and 65,000 are facilities which have almost 3.5, 4,000 and beds and beyond. So one is the scale which allows them to improvise their margins. Second is that their facilities are capable of doing organ transplant. Their facilities are capable of doing high-end cancer care procedures, whether it's radiation or chemotherapy or surgical oncology. And that is what is contributing significantly to the average revenue that they are generating per occupied bed per day, which are the missing blocks when it comes to UMC facilities in Africa. So today we are not doing any organ transplant because Uganda as a country does not have an approved organ transplant act by the government. So it's not about lack of infrastructure or manpower. It is the lack of regulation that we are battling right now. We do not have a radiation therapy unit. Again, the only radiation therapy unit in that country is in the government sector. So it's a high investment, capital investment department for which there is a significant amount of backing that is needed at the bureaucratic and the government level, or towards which we are working. So maybe in the coming few years, we may actively look at putting it up. But as of now, we do not have that. So if I am to negate these two critical aspects of revenue generation, then 40 to 43,000 rupees per day per occupied bed is a fairly good revenue that we are generating at Indian level also. When it comes to Africa, it's definitely
right,
extremely good.
right. And can this be sustained over the longer term, both in
It
Uganda and
will,
Dar es Salaam?
it will, and it should increase as we go forward.
Right,
Sorry. Reason being that we are investing significantly into super specialty. Like I mentioned, IVF, like I mentioned, investing in upgrading our orthopedic and spine department. So now these are, specialties where there is significant potential to grow the revenue. So as we move forward within the same bed capacity, the potential to increase the revenue is always there. For example, IVF, the overall admission required for the cycle is not more than 2 days. A lot of the other services are on a day-care basis. When I talk about advanced, minimally invasive spine procedures, the average length of stay for a patient is just about 3.5 days, not beyond that. So the occupancy levels will start going up a little, but the revenue will increase significantly because these are super specialized services for which we are at liberty to charge a premium. And we've got a good number of Indian doctors from the UMC hospital network in India going into Uganda. So
right,
again, a foreign doctor in that country is able to charge a slight premium. So putting all these things together in the coming few years, definitely the average revenue will continue to gain momentum and continue to increase.
right. And I think after and if the Dar es Salaam acquisition happens, we'll be at 420 beds, right, in Africa alone.
Yes,
Right,
yes.
right. Right. So I think so quickly jumping into the Indian business, Navi Mumbai, which is I think almost off the ground and has started accepting patients, or I think is going to start accepting
No, it
patients very
has.
shortly.
So
It
I'd
has.
like to
Okay.
share this also that it has been commissioned, it has received all statutory approvals, and we've
Right.
started taking patients in. We've
Right.
successfully completed a few advanced procedures, whether it's knee replacement surgeries, whether it's coronary angiography, or whether it's the standard general surgeries. So the patient flow has started, the revenue generation has started, and we expect the momentum to only continue growing in the coming 2 to 3 months. In fact, right now, as a company, as the first facility, we are celebrating what we call the Health Mahotsav throughout the month of December, where we are just ensuring that the brand of UMC hospitals is visible across the targeted catchment area, and patients are invited into the facility to actually explore the services that we have and to get a taste of the kind of service that our staff is able to deliver.
Right, right. So I think how, because I think for while you started off your medical education in India, and then we had that African business. How different it is to get things off the ground, and what are the key challenges right now? Because from what we've seen in the last 7 8 years, it's taken a lot of time even for major hospital chains to definitely and progressively increase their ARPOB as the years have gone by. So, do you think that India is be a much bigger of a challenge than Africa was, or because of the
I wouldn't say that India is
competition?
going to be
Yeah,
much bigger of a challenge. Two reasons. Africa, the entry barrier is significantly high. You're going into a uncharted territory. So, the fear of venturing into and investing at that point of time, privately owned and privately held money was significantly, the risk factor was significantly high. And the challenges were many. So, since we navigated those challenges at that point of time, to a large extent as the entire management team. I mean, I'm not only talking about Dr. Anurag or myself. I'm talking about an entire team which Unihealth has today at that level. From a mental perspective, we are all tuned to what challenges can come up. So that has allowed us to negate a lot of risk when it came to India because a lot of
right,
processes were already set in. Now we
right,
have actually studied the Indian model long back. When we were becoming doctors during the early days of medical tourism, because we also come from that educational background. So it gave us a plus point at that point of time to understand and see and visualize things the way doctors have been seeing it. So that allowed us a good understanding, and we've taken this model into Africa, successfully implemented it. So now implementing it in India is not that big of a challenge. In fact, we have a lot that we have learned from the African model in terms of marketing, in terms of patient centricity, in terms of service requirement, and that is what we are implementing out here today. So the larger challenge out here today that we are facing is more of a statutory perspective because we are so used to Africa, where healthcare is considered as roti, kapda, and makan. So it is a basic necessity. So everyone is forthcoming when it comes to extending a helping hand with your regulatory aspects, because eventually it is the same officer or the bureaucrat who also wants to come in and get treated at your hospital. When it comes to India, the competition is significantly high. There are a lot of big players already there. There are a lot of small size players also that are there. So the processes are slightly different. The licensing process is slightly different. It is more time consuming compared to what it was in Africa for us as Unihealth. So that is a bit of a challenge that we initially faced, but we've got a very good team which has been able to navigate that. So it's a mix of both worlds. I mean, I will not expect the same level of EBITDA margin in India what I have in Africa, but then India gives me the opportunity to scale up much faster. So going from a 50 bed to a 500 bed capacity in India is achievable, in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. It's the pace that we decide. But even if we want to, go fast in Africa, there are multiple other challenges, including the population and the payer mix, which may limit us to the expansion to a particular level itself. So in Africa today, as I speak, I do not see one single facility being a 200 or 250 bed facility in the private sector, because it will not be able to get the right occupancy levels at this stage. Maybe 5 years down the line, things may change. But today, 100, 120 bed is a sweet spot. But when it comes to India, 200, 250 beds also is doable with the right amount of occupancy that a hospital needs to be sustainable and generate profits. For us as UMC hospitals, what gap we have seen in India is between the 50 and 200 bed. So ideally, 50 to 175 beds is a gap where there's no big corporate brand which is focusing. The Apollos and the Max and the Medantas, they all have a focus on 200 to 50 beds and beyond. So that is a scale that they want to venture into. Our focus is to have patient centricity as the core. So when it's a facility which is a 50 bed to a 150, 170 bed, the flexibility that my team has to ensure that the patients are catered to in a patient first approach is much higher than a larger setup would have. So at least for now, in the first phase of expansion, we are not focusing on anything beyond 175, 200 beds. Like I said, Navi Mumbai is 50 beds, Nashik is 200. So we have that as the bracket within which we will continue to grow.
Right, right. And so I think if we quickly delve into the numbers for India, I think we essentially changed our clause for using IPO proceeds for the NATO hospital, right? I think
Yes.
this was something that was decided post the issue, and then
Was the issue. So
right,
when
yeah,
we were working on the IPO, we were simultaneously studying the potential in India. We had
right,
not fixated our mindset that we will grow in India or expand in India on an immediate basis. Because like I mentioned that there is a good number of brands that are already present. The competition is significantly high. For us, this is a new territory. So from a regulatory perspective, also, I understand Uganda, or I would have understood Uganda much better at that point of time
right,
compared to what my understanding about India is. But we
right,
were interacting with a lot of clinicians, a lot of doctors, a lot of people that we know to understand the market. And that is how even Navi Mumbai was chosen as the first facility.
mm,
Because Navi Mumbai is a sector in terms of the geographic location which is growing very fast. You've got a new airport which has come in, which is barely 15 minutes from the hospital. You've got a lot of real estate development happening. You've got the Atal Setu, which has been commissioned. So the potential for Navi Mumbai to grow. Our Honorable Chief Minister has announced NAINA as one of his pet projects that is going to be there. So the development that is going to happen in Navi Mumbai and beyond is huge in the coming five to
right,
7 years.
right,
And that allowed us to fixate on Navi Mumbai as the first location for
right,
us to establish the first
mm,
UMC facility.
right,
Like I mentioned out here, what we saw as a gap was that there's an Apollo, there's a Medicover, there's a Fortis, which are all large scale corporate hospitals. And then there are teaching institutes. So you've got DY Patil, you've got MGM and Tena, which are all MBBS college run backed hospitals. You do not have anyone in the boutique space in the 50, 60 bed capacity, which is a true corporate tertiary care hospital. Then you've
right,
got smaller nursing homes. But this was a gap that we thought is the right fix, the right need, because you've got a good growing middle income, upper middle income, and HNI population now residing in Navi Mumbai.
right,
So that is how we decided on making the first move in Navi Mumbai, and this was somewhere around 2024 January or February,
mm,
which is when we decided that let us take this step forward, and that is when we decided to reallocate the use of proceeds from what it was originally to the hospital
mm,
in Nerul.
right. So if we can understand the unit economics, especially only for the NATO hospital, what is the kind of capital cost? I think that first part of the cost came out of IPO proceeds. and then the cost that it took for refurbishment of the building, because I think this is a leased or rented asset,
Yes. So in India, for us, the
and
model has been very straightforward. We will not be investing in land and building.
it's
In
only
India,
buying.
there is no dearth
Yeah,
of property. There's no dearth of real estate developers, players, or investors who like to hold on to real estate for a leasehold income.
right.
So we decided that the best way forward would be to conserve the capex that would otherwise go in land and building, take it on long-term lease or leave-in license. That is how Nerul, that is how Nashik is also structured in. And the cost, so a lot part of capex, is offset from that perspective. Now, for us at a 50 bed level, the tentative investment that we make is between 15 and 17 crores. That gap of about 1.5, 2 crores is depending upon the stage at which the building is, what kind of renovation, refurbishment that is needed to,
Right.
bring it up to the UMC standard. So Navi Mumbai would have taken about 16 and a half odd crores in terms of the investment. Nasik at a 200 bed is likely to take in somewhere around 27 to 30 odd crores. So this is again the bracket within which all our facilities will come in.
Right.
So a 50 bed somewhere around 15, 16 crores, and a 175, 200 bed capacity at around 30 odd crores. Now, why as we scale up in the bed capacity, the investment does not really scale up in the same proportion is because each UMC facility has some bare minimums. We are going to be having each in line with international guidelines. We've got modular theaters, we've got a cardiac cath lab, we've got complete comprehensive radiology diagnostics. So whether it's a 50 bed or a 200 bed, I will still have a CT scan, I will still have digital X-rays, I will still have the state of the art modular theaters. In Navi Mumbai, for 50 beds, we've got two theaters and a cath lab. In Nasik, for about 175, 200 beds, we've got four theaters and a cath lab. So that is where the critical investment goes in into setting up a operating
Right.
theater, into
Mm.
setting up the intensive care beds. So at that point of time, when you are increasing the beds, the investment in the OTs does not necessarily increase three times or four times. So that is where the as you go up, the investment does not really rise in the same proportion. So each
Right.
UMC facility would take in an investment ranging from 15 to 30 crores, depending upon the bed capacity that we decide to go ahead with.
Right. Right. So I think for Nerol, though, most of our initial investment came out from IPO proceeds. You add
Yes,
on to the running cost, which I presume would be 50, 60 lakhs a month,
that's right.
roughly.
Yeah, just about.
So essentially, when would our sort of payback period end up coming on an EBITDA level at least?
So the target
Anything?
for breaking even operationally is with the start of the coming financial year. Since we've just commissioned, obviously I'm negating this month. So the coming quarter would be the first quarter where we would be running full-fledged. And the target is that by the fourth, fifth month of commissioning, that is somewhere around April or May, operationally we should break even with Navi Mumbai. I don't foresee that as a big challenge. I'm quite confident, maybe a month here and there. I cannot pinpoint a specific date or a month, but yes, somewhere between April and June next year, operationally, Navi Mumbai should break even. That is the target the team has. That is what we are working towards, and we are quite confident of achieving it because we've
Right.
got a very good traction with all the doctors. The kind of infrastructure that we've built is also fairly unique to this geography. It is very similar to the larger hospitals, but with the flexibility of a 50-bed facility. So
Right.
that is giving us a good traction amongst the doctors, and even the feedback from the patients who've come in till now has been very encouraging and positive.
So would it be safe to say that while EBITDA accretion might happen in the next 5 to 6 months, but I think for it to be PAT positive or positive on a standalone basis is going to take some time? Uh,
It will take some time, maybe a year or so. Reason
right.
being that in healthcare, depreciation is significantly heavy.
Mm.
So that will start kicking in, and in terms of an accounting pattern, that will start impacting the bottom line.
Right.
Second, now as we expand, the idea was to expand one unit with equity contribution and maybe one unit with debt, and then again one unit with some sort of an equity contribution, whether it's internal accruals or some sort of fundraise. So with respect to Nasik, as of now, we have taken a banking facility. So we've got 24 crores in terms of the banking facility that we have taken, 22 crores in a term loan and 2 crores of working capital. So as we move forward, there will be some amount of finance cost also that will start coming in. So yes,
Right.
about safe to say that by the start of the financial year 27-28, we should be in a position where these facilities would have matured to a level where they start giving us positive PAT. Definitely, because we are in an expansion modality under the same company, you're going to have more facilities coming up. So somewhere or the other, it will start getting
Right.
offset in terms of the
Right.
bottom line. But
Right.
yes, on a larger footprint, if you look, the top line will start growing significantly. with the benefit that right now it will not eat up into the profitability completely, because we have our mature business in Uganda. We will have an operational unit in Tanzania, hopefully, which will start contributing to the bottom line as well. So on a consolidated basis, despite the rapid expansion, the company will have a fairly stable profitability with some amount of growth every year coming in.
Right.
And then when these facilities mature in a period of 12 months to 18 months, that is the time when the benefit of profitability from these facilities will also start reflecting onto the books.
Right, right. So I think one thing I found very interesting is that the warrants that came through, I think that it was a year back or 7, 8 months back. So I think as investors and people who were tracking the company, it was very heartening to see that you did not go in and dilute equity, but actually increased your stake uh, getting money in. And what was the reason for that 10 crore warrants to come through at that point?
So those funds are going to be needed, like I mentioned, for the expansion that we are undertaking in India. Like I
Right,
mentioned, one part from equity, one facility via debt. And when we are talking about debt, it's obviously not 100% debt. So there's some part of equity contribution that would also be required. Like I mentioned, Navi Mumbai would be about 16 and a half odd crores. Nashik would be about 30 crores. So about 45, 46 crore worth of investment is going into setting up these two facilities, of which 20 to 24 crores worth of funding is there. So we are sitting on another 22 crore worth of requirement, which was to be catered via internal accruals and via some sort of a equity infusion.
right.
Now, we believe in the company. I mean, that is our basis as
Mm,
promoters. We do not intend to do anything beyond scaling up for the coming 2, 3 decades at least. The entire reason for setting up the first hospital was legacy. Like I mentioned some time back, that in 2015, when we were charting out the next 5-year plan, the idea was that though medical tourism on a privately held company basis was doing very well, it was not a business that would allow us to create a everlasting legacy. So from that perspective, I see UMC hospitals to grow from this position to maybe 1,000 beds, maybe 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, and beyond,
right,
wherever the opportunity lies. And that took us to the same context that we were at in 2015, to put in all the resources that we have upfront into the company for it to grow. And then as the time, I don't know, as the time goes and the funding aspect is required to further grow beyond this, then we will be open to going back
right,
to the
right,
investors, raising some amount of capital so that we can grow faster and grow in a more
right,
professional.
right. Right. So I think so if we could have just a small roadmap of what's expected in the next 3, 4 years. I think you've adequately mentioned in the presentation as well that we're looking at Nerul, which is already on the ground, Nasik, which I think you're expecting to get commissioned in the next few months. And I think you
Yes.
mentioned Pune as well. So is there something concrete that's happening there in terms of an acquisition or in terms of O&M or something like that?
Right. So I'll first give you a brief roadmap and then I'll talk about Pune. So the brief roadmap is that when we decided to invest, I mean, at the time of the IPO itself, we had decided that in a period of 3 to 4 years, we will scale up to 1,000 bed capacity. So by 2027, the target is to first achieve 1,000 bed commission capacity, which would now be nearly equally spread between India and Africa. So the idea is to have at least 500 to 600 beds in India and about 400 to 500 beds in Africa. Like I mentioned, Uganda, we will be scaling up. We may be looking at 150 beds in totality, up from 120 right now, adding on another 120 beds, hopefully in Tanzania. So that would take us to about 270 beds when it comes to Africa in the coming year. And then maybe another 100, beds will get added on in the next 24 months or so. When it comes to India, we are already sitting on 250 beds between Navi Mumbai and Nasik. And the next step would be Pune and then the different suburbs of Mumbai. So from that perspective, the first 1,000 beds is the roadmap initially till the end of 2027. And post that, then we will work on whether, the next target is 2,000, 3,000, 5,000. But at that point of time, it will also include some part of acquisition opportunities that come across. Because when you want to grow from 1,000 to a 3,000 or a 5,000 bed capacity, it is not possible to grow organically in a short tenure.
Right,
So the idea would be at that point of time to also look at the right assets to acquire in terms of operations and management. What we understood right now in terms of the study that we undertook is there are a lot of good 75, 80 bed, 100 bed facilities, which were initiated or which was set up by single specialty doctors. Now, those doctors are now inching towards their late 60s, early 70s, and a lot of them either are having the limitation where the next generation is not in India or is not from the field. They have a limitation that the next round of professionalism and expansion in the facility that they've set up would require significant amount of investment, which at that age they are not very keen to make. So they are looking outward where someone can come in and take over the operations and management, and that is a golden opportunity for a company like Unihealth. Second, we are also there in the consultancy services vertical. So there are projects that we are providing our services to in terms of helping them set it up. Now, some of these projects are backed by investors or principals or groups which are not necessarily from the healthcare sector. So these are either foundations or trusts or corporates which are setting up hospitals from a social capital perspective and eventually are going to look outward to an Apollo Max, Medanta, or a UMC to come in and operate them in a professional way. So that again is a big opportunity that is lying. And since we are helping them set these hospitals up, there is a relationship that has been developed. So I wouldn't say that we would be preferred, but we would stand an equal chance when it comes to them outsourcing the operations. And since
Right,
the vision has been thought of by us, we would be in a fairly good position to execute it as well. And that is something that we believe the project principals also understand.
right,
So
right,
as we go forward, there are significant opportunities that will start coming up. Right now, definitely Pune, there is, I mean, that is the next city that is on the target. There are certain properties that we have shortlisted, that we have looked at, that we are considering. Nothing concrete. Once Nashik is off the feet in terms of its commissioning process, that is when we will allocate our team to look into Pune on a conclusive basis because you never know. I mean, we start looking today and you may conclude with something within 15 days. You start
right,
looking today and it may take 3 months. So there are a lot of opportunities that we have looked at in terms of an initial stage discussion. Since I've got a lot of family based out of Pune, my wife comes from that city. So the understanding of that geography is fairly good of which are the right locations. The overall network in the social circle of Pune is very good on a personal basis. So getting access to the right property is not a tough task. It has to be at the right location at the right cost. So that is something that we'll start working on hopefully from the first quarter next financial year.
sure, sure. And so just a few more questions. I just want to ask in terms of revenue guidance. I think you stated multiple times on call of having a guidance of 1 crore per bed by FY27, by FY28. Even if that takes, say, a year or more or a year sooner, isn't that is that realistic or is that a bit aggressive? I just want to understand your calculation in terms of ARPOB, and because if that does happen that takes the hospital to a whole another level. But I just want to understand, is this guidance realistic in per se?
Right. So when you say about realistic, see, this 1 crore would translate to about 27,000, 28,000 per day.
Hmm.
Now, when we are talking about a good surgical setup that we intend to put or that we have put in Navi Mumbai, we are putting in Nasik, that is a very much realistic target to achieve. Definitely the what do you call the intended average revenue would be beyond this. So if I look at Apollo Max, Medanta, or anyone else, they are all in the 55,000 to 65,000 rupee per day bracket. So
Right.
even if I'm to taper it down, minus the specialties that they have and we won't have, we can still easily look at 40, 45,000 rupees as an achievable target once we have matured to a particular level. So in the
Hmm.
initial stages, after the first 6 to 9 months, inching towards 27, 28,000 on a per day basis, that is reaching a crore rupees on an annual basis is very much realistic and achievable, and we are quite confident. So I am talking about a figure which is actually achievable. The intended or the targeted figure for the team would be to actually reach 1.5, 1.6 crores per bed.
Right.
And as we talk about between now and the next 3 years, obviously there's some amount of inflation that is likely to happen. There's some amount of increase in the expenses that is likely to happen. India is going from a developing to a developed sector scenario when it comes to the healthcare sector. So the penetration of insurance is increasing, the penetration of government schemes is increasing, the knowledge about healthcare itself is increasing. So it's not
Right.
only about surgical care, but it's also about preventive care that is increasing, which also allows us to tap into the large market of health checkups, pre-employment checkups, and everything. Now that does not necessarily give us big revenue, But if I'm doing the executive health checkup for say 100 patients, 4 or 5 of them are likely to get converted into inpatients for some procedure or the other in a span of 12 to 24 months. I mean, that is the
Right.
basic statistic.
Right.
Because some patient will be diabetic, he may have a heart problem, some may have a diabetic, kidney problem, and there are multiple other challenges that a human
Right.
body has.
Right.
So something or the other is likely to come up. So from that perspective, 1 crore as an annual revenue per occupied bed is a very much achievable and realistic target. And we are quite confident that that is something that we will achieve, as we mature. Now, whether we are able to take it up to 1.2, 1.4, 1.5 crores, that is how well the management team, the executive team of the hospital is able to deliver on, the plans that we have
Right.
conceptualized today.
Right. Right. So I think so on a consolidated basis, if we do 800,000 beds, say 3 or 4 years from now, and 800,000 crores of revenue with your guidance of a 30% EBITDA, then is it safe to say that we'd be at a 10-12% PAT, steady state 10 12
So
percent
just
margin?
one minor correction out here. If I'm
Yeah.
looking at 800 beds as a fully commissioned strength in 3 years from
Right.
now, I'm looking at an average occupancy somewhere between 60 to 70%.
Right.
So
Right.
this 1.2 crore is the average revenue per occupied bed,
Right. Of
which is a
course. Yeah.
statistic that everyone gives.
Yeah.
So if I'm talking about say 500, 550 occupied beds, so
Right.
the revenue translation will be in accordance with that and not in accordance with the
Right.
commission bed capacity. So that was
Right.
one minor correction.
Right.
Definitely the EBITDA target will remain at 30% and above. And if that is effectively translated, then yes, 10-12% PAT margin is something which is definitely on the side and is achievable.
Sure. Okay. Right. No, I think more or less this concludes our webinar for today. It's very heartening to say that we've followed the hospital industry closely for the last many years now. It's very apparent that India has a huge structural deficiency when it comes to hospital beds per 10,000 people, number of doctors per 10,000 people, whatever metric you choose. I think it's the same for Africa, and it's very heartening to see that you all have, as first generation entrepreneurs, you all have grown so quickly, and we'll be very happy to be a part of this growth journey and keep tracking the company as it progresses.
Oh, so it's a pleasure. It has been a pleasure interacting with you and sharing the journey of Unihealth. Since Unihealth was born out of an idea which was backed completely by passion, I feel extremely happy whenever I get a chance to interact with someone and discuss about what the company can achieve. Obviously, there are a wide variety of factors that come into play. One good thing that we have, I mean, the last point that I would want to, share with you that between 2010 and 2025, in the 15 years of journey that Dr. Anurag and I have had, I would say the attrition level at the top management or the senior management level has been nearly zero. So,
Right.
barring 1 or 2 people who would have left because of some personal reasons, we've not really had anyone desert the ship, as I can say.
Mm.
And that is something that we really pride ourselves in because that is something that has given us the bench strength and the ability to access trusted manpower, which is the critical factor as we grow and expand further.
Right.
So, it's not about the funds, it's not about the beds or buying the equipment, but it's
Right.
about the people who are actually going to execute it. So, I'm going to be
Right.
seated out of Mumbai. There's going to be a team executing the vision in Nasik. There's going to be a team executing the vision in, say, Dar es Salaam or in Pune. Now, that bench strength is something that will form the core for UniHealth, and we are very, very happy as of now that in the 15 years what we have achieved other than the bed capacity or the revenue is more so a team which is equally passionate about the vision that we have and which is equally dedicated or rather more dedicated than as promoters today we would be.
Right. Right.
So they consider this as part of their own entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
and that is what gives us the confidence that whatever we are intending to achieve we will be able to effectively achieve in the coming
Sure.
years.
Sure. Well, that's very heartening to hear, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time,
Thank you
and
so much.
Pleasure.
we'll reconnect.
Yeah.
Thank you.